The sky turned the color of death at 4:47 in the afternoon. Eleanora Hartwell had lived in Hollister, Missouri for 68 years, and she knew what that particular shade of green meant. She had seen it twice before in her lifetime. Once when she was 12, when a tornado had torn through Taney County and taken her family's barn along with 3 of their horses. And once when she was 41, when another twister had ripped across the landscape and killed her first husband, Daniel, who had been caught in the fields trying to save their livestock. Green sky meant death was coming. It always had. It always would. She stood on the sagging porch of her farmhouse, one weathered hand gripping the rail that threatened to give way if she leaned on it too hard. The emergency sirens had been wailing for 20 minutes now, their mechanical screams cutting through the thick, heavy air that pressed down on everything like a wool blanket soaked in hot water. The radio announcer's voice had been shaking when she'd listened earlier, warning residents to seek immediate shelter. This wasn't a typical spring storm rolling across the Missouri plains. This was an EF4 tornado packing winds of over 170 miles per hour, carving a path of destruction directly toward Taney County. Directly toward her. Eleanora's farmhouse was old, built by her grandfather Theodore in 1952, back when men still built things with their hands and their sweat and their stubborn refusal to quit. The white paint was peeling now, curling away from the wood in long strips that reminded her of dead skin. The roof leaked in 3 places. She'd learned to position buckets strategically when the forecast called for rain. The electricity had been spotty for months, flickering on and off like a dying heartbeat, but she couldn't afford to have anyone come fix it. She couldn't afford much of anything anymore. After Thomas died 9 years ago, the medical bills had taken everything. 2 years of chemotherapy, hospital stays, experimental treatments that didn't work but cost a fortune anyway. She'd sold off parcels of land piece by piece, watching her family's legacy shrink year by year until all that remained was the house, the barn, and 40 acres of tired earth that barely grew anything worth harvesting. But she had the cellar beneath the barn with its reinforced concrete walls and heavy steel doors, built by her father Harrison after the tornado of 1967, the one that had killed Daniel. Harrison had sworn that no member of his family would ever die that way again, and he'd kept that promise. The cellar had saved Eleanora's life once back in '89 when another twister had come through. It would save her life again today. She was about to head inside to gather what few valuables she could carry when she saw them. Headlights, dozens of them coming down Route 76 fighting against winds that were already pushing 50 miles per hour and climbing. The trees along the roadside were bent nearly horizontal, their branches whipping violently. Debris was starting to fly through the air. A trash can tumbled across the highway like a child's toy, and through all of it came the motorcycles. Eleanora squinted through the darkening sky, her heart beginning to pound. The riders were struggling, their bikes wobbling dangerously as gusts of wind threatened to throw them off the road entirely. They were pulling over one by one, seeking any shelter they could find, but there was nothing out here. Nothing but empty fields that stretched to the horizon, a few scattered houses, and Eleanora's old farm sitting like a forgotten monument to better days. The first motorcycle skidded to a stop at the end of her long gravel driveway. The rider was massive, dressed in black leather that gleamed even in the sickly green light. His face was hidden behind a full helmet and a black bandana. Behind him, more bikes were arriving. 10, 20, 30. The roar of their engines competed with the rising wind, creating a sound like the world was tearing itself apart. Eleanora's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew who these men were. The patches on their leather vests were unmistakable even from a distance. Hell's Angels. The words were stitched in bold letters across their backs, along with the Death Head logo that everyone in America recognized. The most notorious motorcycle club in the country. The kind of men that mothers warned their daughters about. The kind of men that sheriffs watched carefully when they rolled through town. Every instinct screamed at her to run inside, lock the doors, hide in the cellar, and pray that they moved on. Let them fend for themselves. They'd chosen this life, chosen to ride through a tornado warning. That was on them. But then she saw something that changed everything. One of the riders was down. His bike had slipped on the wet pavement, and two others were helping him up. Even from where she stood, Eleonora could see that he was hurt. He was limping badly, clutching his left arm against his chest in a way that suggested broken bones. His helmet was cracked. Behind them, the sky was getting darker, greener, angrier. The tornado was close now, maybe 5 miles out, maybe less. These men were going to die out here. Eleonora Hartwell made a decision that would change her life forever. She grabbed the flashlight she kept by the door and ran toward them, her old legs carrying her faster than they had in years. The wind tried to push her back, but she leaned into it, waving her arms over her head. "Hey, hey, over here!" The lead rider turned. Even through the rain that was starting to fall in fat, heavy drops, she could see his confusion. An old woman in a faded floral dress running toward a group of Hell's Angels in the middle of a tornado warning. It probably didn't make sense to him. Hell, it barely made sense to her. "There's a cellar!" Eleonora shouted over the wind, which was so loud now that she could barely hear her own voice. "Under my barn. It's reinforced. You'll be safe there." The rider lifted his visor. He was in his 50s, with a gray beard and eyes the color of winter steel. Eyes that had seen too much, the kind of eyes that belonged to men who'd been to war and back. For a long moment, he just stared at her, and Eleonora wondered if he'd heard her at all. Then he spoke, his voice rough and deep. "Ma'am, do you know who we are?" "I know exactly who you are," Eleonora said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "And I know that tornado doesn't care about your patches. Now get your boys off those bikes and follow me before we all die out here." Something shifted in the man's eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise, or both. He turned and bellowed orders to his brothers, his voice somehow cutting through the howling wind like a knife through butter. "Everyone off. Leave the bikes. Follow the lady now." The next few minutes were chaos. 79 men abandoned their motorcycles in a ragged line along the road in Eleonora's driveway. They ran toward her, these large men in leather and chains and tattoos, following an old woman half their size. She led them around the back of the barn to the heavy steel doors that covered the cellar entrance. Rust had made them difficult to open. She'd been meaning to oil the hinges for months, but like everything else, it was a task she'd never gotten around to. 3 of the bikers grabbed the handles and pulled together. Their muscles strained, metal screamed. Then the doors swung wide, revealing concrete stairs descending into darkness. "Go, go, go," Eleonora urged them. One by one, the Hell's Angels poured into the cellar. Eleonora counted them as they passed her nurse's training from 30 years ago, kicking in automatically. 40, 50, 60. The injured man was being carried down by 2 of his brothers, his face twisted in pain. 70, 75. The wind was screaming now, a sound like a freight train bearing down on them. Eleonora could barely stand. She had to lean against the barn wall to keep from being blown over. Debris was flying everywhere, A piece of corrugated metal flew past her head, missing by inches. "That's everyone!" the lead rider shouted, his hand gripping her shoulder. "Get inside." Eleonora took one last look at the sky. The tornado was visible now, a massive black funnel descending from the clouds maybe 2 miles away and closing fast. It was the biggest she'd ever seen, bigger than the one that killed Daniel, bigger than the one in '89. This was the kind of tornado that erased towns from maps. She ran down the stairs, her old knees protesting with every step. The lead rider followed, and together they pulled the heavy doors shut. The latches clicked into place. Then there was only darkness, the sound of 79 people breathing hard, and the growing roar of the monster above. The cellar was never meant to hold this many people. It was a space perhaps 40 feet by 30, with concrete walls, a low ceiling, and a floor of poured cement that Harrison had laid himself back in '67. Emergency supplies lined the shelves along the walls. Canned food, water jugs in gallon containers, flashlights, blankets, medical supplies. Eleonora had maintained it religiously since Thomas died, even when she couldn't afford to fix the leaking roof or the failing electricity. This cellar was her insurance policy, her last line of defense against a world that seemed determined to take everything from her. Now it was packed with leather-clad bikers, pressed shoulder to shoulder, their faces illuminated by the weak beam of Eleonora's flashlight. The air was already getting warm and close. It smelled like wet leather sweat gasoline and fear. "Does anyone have injuries?" Eleonora asked, her voice steady despite the fact that her heart was racing, despite the fact that she was trapped underground with 79 Hell's Angels while a tornado raged above. "Razor's got a broken arm," someone called out from the back. "Maybe some cracked ribs, too." "Bring him here. I have a first aid kit." The injured man was helped to the front of the crowd. He was young, maybe 32, with a shock of red hair visible now that someone had removed his cracked helmet. Tattoos covered his neck and crawled up behind his ears. His face was pale with pain, slick with sweat. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle. Eleonora knelt beside him, her old knees cracking in protest. She clicked on a battery-powered lantern that she kept on one of the shelves. Warm yellow light flooded the immediate area. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, already reaching for the first aid kit. The man blinked clearly, not expecting to be called sweetheart by anyone, let alone a grandmother in the middle of a tornado. "Razor, ma'am." "Well, Razor, I'm going to need to look at that arm. It's going to hurt, but I'll be as gentle as I can, okay?" He nodded, biting down on his lower lip. Eleonora went to work. Her hands were steady. They'd always been steady even when the rest of her was falling apart. She'd been a nurse for 30 years before retiring at 62. She'd set bones, stitched wounds, delivered babies, held the hands of the dying. This was familiar territory. She examined Razor's arm carefully, her fingers probing gently. Definitely broken. Radius and ulna both from the feel of it. Clean breaks at least. No bone fragments pressing against the skin. She fashioned a splint from the materials in her first aid kit, working quickly and efficiently, while Razor gritted his teeth and tried not to make any sound. Above them the tornado hit. The sound was unlike anything Eleonora had ever heard, and she'd heard 2 tornadoes in her lifetime. This wasn't just wind. This was a physical force, a pressure that made their ears pop and their chests tighten. The cellar rattled violently. Dust fell from the ceiling in thick clouds. The lantern swayed on its hook. Somewhere in the darkness, someone started praying in Spanish. Another voice joined in speaking words in what might have been Russian. The sound went on and on, a roar that seemed to come from the center of the earth. The walls vibrated, the floor shook. It felt like the world was ending. Eleonora finished securing Razor's splint and stood up her knees, protesting again. She raised her voice, projecting it the way she used to when she worked in the ER and needed to cut through chaos. "Everyone listen to me!" The praying stopped. 79 faces turned toward her, visible now in the glow of multiple flashlights that people had pulled from their pockets. "This cellar has survived 2 tornadoes. It will survive this one, but I need everyone to stay calm, stay low, stay together. We're going to be fine." It was a lie, or at least it might have been. She had no idea if the cellar would hold against a tornado this big. But these men needed to hear confidence. They needed to believe that someone knew what they were doing. The lead rider pushed through the crowd to stand beside her. In the lantern light, Eleonora could read the patches on his vest more clearly now. President, Hell's Angels, Missouri. His beard was more gray than black, and up close she could see the scars on his face. Small ones near his eyebrow and along his jaw. The kind of scars that came from shrapnel. "I'm Ryan," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the roar above. "Ryan Blackwood. Most people call me Iron." "Eleonora Hartwell. Most people call me Ellie." "Ellie." Ryan nodded slowly, his winter steel eyes studying her face. "Thank you for what you're doing. You didn't have to let us in." "Of course I did. What kind of person would I be if I left you out there to die?" Ryan studied her for a long moment. "Most people would have locked their doors and pretended they didn't see us. We're not exactly popular." "Most people are fools," Eleonora said flatly. Then she turned to address the crowd again. "Now I've got coffee and thermoses and blankets on the shelves. It's going to be a long night, boys. Might as well get comfortable." For the next 4 hours, while the tornado raged above and then slowly moved away, Eleonora Hartwell did something remarkable. She transformed a concrete bunker full of terrified bikers into something that almost resembled a home. She distributed blankets, poured coffee into paper cups, handed out granola bars from her emergency supplies. She checked on Razor every 30 minutes, making sure his splint was secure and his pain was manageable. She even had aspirin in her kit, and she gave him 3 tablets with water. And she told stories. "My husband Thomas built this cellar in 1994, she said, sitting on an overturned plastic crate while the storm continued its assault above them. "Right after we had a close call with a tornado that came within a mile of the house. He said if he was going to marry me, he was going to make sure I always had somewhere safe to go." She paused, smiling at the memory. He'd survived Vietnam only to be terrified of Midwest weather. Isn't that something? "He sounds like a good man," Ryan said. He was sitting on the floor nearby, his back against the concrete wall. "The best. We had 9 years together before cancer took him. Pancreatic. Fast and mean." Eleonora's smile turned sad. "But he did good work on this cellar. Harrison would have been proud. Harrison, my father. He built the original cellar back in '67 after a tornado killed my first husband, Daniel." The cellar went quiet. 79 men were suddenly paying very close attention. "You've lost 2 husbands to this county," Ryan said softly. 3 if you count the tornado that killed my high school sweetheart before we could get married. Robert. Eleonora shook her head. "Missouri weather doesn't play favorites. It takes whoever it wants." Someone in the back of the crowd spoke up, a younger voice. "Then why stay?" Why not move somewhere safer? Eleonora considered the question. Because this is home. Because my family's buried here. Because leaving would feel like giving up, and I'm too stubborn for that. She looked around at all the faces watching her. Besides, where would I go? Tornado Alley stretches from Texas to the Dakotas. Can't outrun the weather. Might as well stay where your roots are. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The tension was easing. Men who had been rigid with fear were now leaning against each other, sharing water bottles, talking in low voices. "Where were you headed?" Eleonora asked, looking at Ryan. "Before the storm, I mean." "Charity run," Ryan replied. "Annual ride from St. Louis to Branson. We raise money for veterans organizations, homeless shelters, kids with cancer." He shrugged at her surprised expression. "We're not what people think we are, Ellie." "I never thought you were." Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You said you knew exactly who we were, back on the road." "I did. I do." Eleonora was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a worn photograph protected by a plastic sleeve. "My son Marcus joined a motorcycle club when he was 22. I didn't understand it at first, worried myself sick. But then I met his brother, saw how they looked out for each other, how they became family." She handed Ryan the photograph. It showed a young man in his mid-20s standing proudly beside a motorcycle. He had dark hair, a wide smile, and his mother's eyes. On his vest was a patch that Ryan recognized immediately. The death head, the Hells Angels logo. Ryan stared at the photograph, then back at Eleonora. "Your son was a Hells Angel for 12 years, until he died overseas. Army. 2 tours in Afghanistan." Eleonora's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened in the lantern light. "His brothers came to his funeral, rode from 6 different states, stood guard at his grave for 3 days." The cellar had gone completely silent now. Even the wind above seemed to have quieted, though that might have just been Eleonora's imagination. Ryan's voice was rough. "What was his road name?" "Ghost. They called him Ghost because he could move so quiet, could sneak up on anyone without making a sound." Eleonora smiled. "Drove me crazy when he was a kid. I never heard him coming." Something changed in Ryan's face. He turned and called out to the crowd, his voice cutting through the silence. "Anyone here remember a brother named Ghost Marcus Hartwell? Missouri chapter, early 2000s. Murmurs spread through the cellar. Then a voice from the back, older and gravelly. "I knew Ghost." An elderly biker pushed forward through the crowd. He was in his late 60s with a white beard that hung halfway down his chest and a weathered face mapped with wrinkles and old scars. When he reached the front, he looked at Eleonora with something like wonder. "You're Ghost's mom," he said. It wasn't a question. The one who used to send care packages to the whole chapter. Cookies and scarves and handwritten letters. Eleonora nodded, and suddenly tears were spilling down her cheeks, tears she'd been holding back for hours, for years. "I'll be damned," the old biker said softly. Then he pulled her into a hug, this massive man with his leather and his scars holding a 68-year-old woman like she was made of glass. "Brothers," he called out, his voice thick with emotion. "This is Ghost's mom. She used to take care of us like we were her own kids." The cellar erupted. Men surged forward, not threateningly, but with outstretched hands and misty eyes. They took turns hugging Eleonora, thanking her, sharing memories of Marcus that she'd never heard. The time Ghost had talked a suicidal brother down from a bridge. The time he'd spent his own money to buy Christmas presents for a chapter member's kids. The time he'd driven through a blizzard to sit with a dying friend in the hospital. "He never told me these things," Eleonora said, her voice breaking. He never told me. That was Ghost, the old biker said. His name was Silas, she learned. Silas McGraw, road name Old Timer. He didn't do it for the credit. He just did what needed doing. And above them, unnoticed by anyone, the tornado slowly moved away, leaving destruction in its wake, but sparing the 79 men and one old woman hidden beneath the earth. The stories continued through the night. Each biker seemed to have a memory of Marcus, some small moment that had stayed with them. Ryan told about the time Ghost had mediated a dispute between two chapters that were on the verge of violence, using nothing but patience and respect. A younger rider named Cole shared how Ghost had mentored him when he first joined, teaching him the difference between living outlaw and living stupid. Silas talked about riding next to Ghost on long hauls, how the young man had this gift for making everyone feel heard, feel valued. He had your eyes, Silas said to Eleonora. Same kindness in them, same steel underneath. Eleonora learned things about her son she'd never known. That he'd been called Ghost, not just because he moved quietly, but because he had a way of appearing exactly when someone needed him most, like a guardian spirit. That he'd saved 3 lives during his time with the club, pulling brothers out of burning buildings and stopping them from making fatal mistakes. That his last words before deploying to Afghanistan had been about his mother making the chapter promise to look after her if anything happened. He made you promise, Eleonora asked Silas. The old man's face clouded. He did. Wrote it all down in a letter, gave it to our chapter president. But then President Hank died in an accident in 2013 and things got scattered. We lost track of the letter, lost track of the promise. His voice broke. We failed him, Ellie. For 12 years we failed to keep our word to Ghost. You didn't know, Eleonora said gently. You didn't know where to find me. We should have looked harder. Ryan placed a hand on Silas's shoulder. We're here now. That's what matters. The hours crawled by. Razor's pain medication kicked in, and he dozed fitfully, his head resting against a supply shelf. Some of the other bikers slept too exhausted from the adrenaline crash, but most stayed awake, keeping vigil in the darkness, bound together by shared fear and the strange intimacy of survival. Around 3 in the morning, the sound above finally stopped. The roar faded to silence. The walls stopped shaking. The pressure in their ears normalized. Is it over? Someone asked. Ryan checked his watch. Storm should have passed by now, but we wait for daylight. No point going up in the dark. So they waited. Eleonora made another round with coffee, though supplies were running low. She checked on Razor again, pleased to see that the swelling in his arm hadn't gotten worse. She sat with Silas for a while, looking at the photograph of Marcus, listening to more stories about her son. Did he ever talk about me? She asked quietly. All the time. You were his hero, Ellie. More than any soldier, more than any president. You. Silas smiled. He used to say his mom taught him everything worth knowing. How to be kind without being weak. How to be strong without being cruel. How to love without expecting anything back. Eleonora's throat tightened. I just raised him the best I could. You raised him perfect, and he never forgot it. Dawn came, slowly, gray light filtering through the cracks around the cellar doors. Ryan was the first to move, climbing the stairs carefully. He pushed against the doors. They resisted at first, something heavy blocking them from above, but with help from 3 other bikers they managed to shove them open. Fresh air rushed in, cool and clean. Ryan emerged first, and what he saw made his stomach drop. Eleonora's farmhouse was gone. Not damaged, not partially destroyed. Gone. Where the white clapboard house had stood for 74 years, there was now nothing but a field of splinters and scattered debris. The porch where Eleonora had stood yesterday was obliterated. Her truck had been thrown 200 yards into a field wrapped around an oak tree like aluminum foil. The chicken coop was gone. The tool shed was gone. Even the old swing set from Marcus's childhood, which had sat rusting in the yard for decades, had vanished. The barn had lost most of its roof, but the walls still stood, and beneath it the cellar had held. Harrison's concrete bunker had done exactly what it was built to do. "Ellie." Ryan turned to help her up the stairs, his voice gentle. "Maybe you should prepare yourself." But Eleonora was already climbing, moving with the determination of someone who'd survived too much to be broken by one more loss. She emerged into the morning light and stopped taking in the devastation with eyes that had seen this before, that had learned to measure catastrophe and move forward anyway. For a long moment, she said nothing. The other bikers emerged behind her, 79 men, forming a silent circle around this small woman and the ruins of her life. Then Eleonora let out a breath. "Well," she said, her voice steady, "I never liked that kitchen anyway. Oven never heated right." Ryan stared at her in disbelief. Then, despite everything, he started to laugh. He couldn't help it. The absurdity of it, the sheer audacity of making jokes when you just lost everything. Once he started, he couldn't stop, and soon the whole group was laughing, the release of tension after hours of terror exploding out of them in waves of slightly hysterical mirth. "You're something else, Ellie," Ryan said when he could breathe again. "You just lost everything, and you're making jokes." "I didn't lose everything," Eleonora said, gesturing at the men surrounding her. "Everyone's alive. My son's picture is still in my pocket. I've got my memories, and I've got my health. That's more than some people have." She looked around at the destruction. Houses can be rebuilt. Things can be replaced. People can't. But as the bikers spread out to assess the damage as the sun rose higher and revealed the full scope of the tornado's path, Eleonora felt something inside her begin to crack. The photograph of Marcus was safe in her pocket. The cellar and its supplies had survived, but everything else was gone. Thomas's war medals from Vietnam, the quilt her grandmother had made, 40 years of photo albums, the letters Marcus had sent from Afghanistan, her mother's china, the rocking chair Daniel had built when she was pregnant, all of it scattered across Missouri or ground into the earth. She walked slowly through the debris field looking for anything salvageable. A broken plate here, a twisted picture frame there, nothing intact, nothing whole. The life she'd built over 68 years had been erased in minutes. She found herself standing where her bedroom had been, or where she thought it had been. It was hard to tell. The foundation was still visible in places, but the house itself was completely gone. She'd slept in that room for 47 years, first with Daniel briefly, then alone, then with Thomas, then alone again for the last 9 years. Now it was just dirt and splinters. Ryan found her there, standing very still, her arms wrapped around herself. "Ellie." "I'm okay," she said automatically. Then more honestly, "I will be okay, eventually." The other bikers were taking stock. The news was grim. The tornado had cut a massive path through Hollister and 3 neighboring towns. Hundreds of homes damaged or destroyed. Power lines down across the entire county. Roads blocked with debris. Cell service was out. The National Guard was being mobilized. But the 79 Hells Angels were safe, all of them, not a single serious injury beyond Razor's broken arm. Ryan gathered his brothers near what remained of Eleanora's front steps, just a few concrete blocks and splintered wood. "Listen up," he said, his voice carrying across the devastated yard. "This woman saved our lives. Every single one of us would be dead if she hadn't opened her door. And now she's got nothing. No house, no car, nothing but the clothes on her back and a cellar full of canned beans." He looked around at the faces of his brothers, these hard men who had chosen a life outside society's rules. "We're Hell's Angels. We don't forget our debts, and we owe this woman everything." "What are you thinking, Iron?" asked a younger rider named Cole. Ryan turned to Eleanora, who had rejoined them, looking small and tired and lost. "Ellie, do you have somewhere to stay? Family we can call? My sister Patricia's in Springfield." Eleanora set her voice flat. "She's been trying to get me to move in with her for years. Guess she'll get her wish now." "Don't make any decisions yet." Ryan crouched beside her, his voice serious. "We need to get moving. The roads are going to be chaos, and we've got brothers waiting for us in Branson who'll be worried sick. But I want you to know something." He took her weathered hand in his scarred one. "We're coming back, Ellie, all of us, and we're going to make this right." Eleanora smiled gently, sadly. "You don't owe me anything, Ryan. I just did what anyone should do." "No," Ryan said firmly. "You did what almost nobody would do. And we don't forget. 5 days, Ellie. Give us 5 days." Over the next hour, the bikers prepared to leave. They cleared debris from the driveway so they could retrieve their motorcycles. They helped Eleanora salvage what little had survived, finding a metal lockbox that had been thrown into a tree. Inside were some important papers and Marcus's Purple Heart medal protected by a waterproof seal. They made sure she had food and water to last until help arrived. Before mounting his bike, Ryan pulled out his phone. Cell service was still out, but the camera worked. He took a picture of Eleanora standing in front of her destroyed home. She looked small and tired, her gray hair disheveled, her floral dress stained with dirt and dust. But her eyes were still bright, still fierce. "I'm sending this to every chapter in the country the minute we get cell service," Ryan said. "Everyone's going to know what you did. I didn't do it for recognition." "I know, but you're getting it anyway." Ryan climbed onto his bike. The engine roared to life, followed by 78 others. The sound was deafening, but somehow comforting. Life continuing after disaster, the world still turning. 5 days, Ellie," Ryan called over the noise. "Then look out your window." "What window?" Eleanora called back, managing a smile. "They're all gone." Ryan grinned. "Trust me." The 79 Hells Angels rode away, their engines roaring through the devastated landscape, their leather gleaming in the morning sun. Eleanora watched until the last bike disappeared from view, until the sound faded to nothing, and she was alone with the ruins of her life. Then she sat down on what used to be her front steps, and finally allowed herself to cry. Great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Tears for the house, tears for Thomas and Marcus and Daniel, and all the losses that kept piling up year after year. Tears for the loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long. Tears because she was 68 years old and starting over, and she was so damn tired. She didn't know what Ryan had planned. She didn't know that her picture was being saved to dozens of phones ready to spread the moment cell service was restored. She didn't know that phone calls would be made, supplies would be gathered, money would be raised. She didn't know that a small army was being mobilized across 27 states. All she knew was that she had lost her home, her possessions, nearly everything that connected her to her past, except for a photograph and a medal in a waterproof box. But she had saved 79 lives. And as she sat there crying in the wreckage, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that sometimes maybe that was enough. That sometimes the price of doing the right thing was everything you owned, and you paid it anyway because that's what decent people did. She cried until she had no tears left. Then she stood up, brushed the dirt off her dress, and started walking toward town to find help. Because that's what you did. You survived. You kept going. You didn't quit, even when the world took everything and left you with nothing but grief and determination. 5 days felt like 5 years. Eleonora stayed with her sister, Patricia Walsh, in Springfield, sleeping in a guest room that smelled like lavender sachets and felt nothing like home. Patricia meant well. She always did. But her constant fussing only made Eleonora feel more lost, more disconnected from the life she'd known. Patricia's house was everything Eleonora's had never been. Modern, clean, organized. Every piece of furniture matched. Every picture hung at the perfect height. Even the throw pillows on the couch were arranged in some predetermined pattern that Patricia adjusted every time someone sat down. It was suffocating in its perfection. "You should just stay here permanently," Patricia said over breakfast on the 4th morning. She was younger than Eleonora by 6 years, with hair dyed an unnatural shade of auburn and a wardrobe full of athleisure wear she never actually exercised in. "That old farm was falling apart anyway, Ellie. Thomas has been gone for 9 years. Marcus for 12. It's time to move on." Eleonora stirred her coffee without answering. Move on. As if 68 years of memories could be packed into boxes and forgotten. As if the ghosts that haunted that land could be left behind as easily as furniture. As if she could just erase Daniel and Thomas and Marcus and Harrison and all the people who'd made that farm mean something. "I'm serious," Patricia continued. "You can have the guest room. Gerald and I have been talking about converting the basement into a mother-in-law suite. You could have your own space, your own bathroom. We'd take care of you." "I don't need taking care of," Eleonora said quietly. "You're 68 years old, and you just lost everything in a tornado. I think you need taking care of more than you want to admit." Eleonora set down her coffee cup with a little more force than necessary. "Patricia, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but that farm is my home. It's where I buried 2 husbands. It's where I raised my son. It's where I've lived my entire adult life. I'm not giving up on it." "There's nothing left to give up on. It's gone, Ellie. The land is still there, the cellar is still there, and I'm still here." Eleonora stood up. "I'm going to rebuild, somehow." Patricia's expression softened into pity, which was somehow worse than the arguing. "Honey, with what money you're living on Social Security and Thomas's pension. You can't afford to rebuild. Then I'll figure something out." Eleonora's phone had been buzzing constantly since the tornado. Reporters wanted interviews. News stations wanted statements. The picture Ryan had taken had gone viral the moment cell service was restored. The headline was everywhere. "Elderly woman shelters, 79 Hells Angels from deadly tornado." Articles on CNN, Fox News, CBS. Even international outlets had picked up the story. A feel-good story in a world that desperately needed one. Eleonora ignored them all. She didn't want to be famous. She didn't want to be interviewed or photographed or turned into some kind of symbol. She just wanted her house back. She wanted her life back. But on the morning of the 5th day, Patricia insisted on driving her back to Hollister to meet with the insurance adjuster. The drive was sobering. The tornado had carved a path of destruction through 3 counties, a scar across the landscape visible from miles away. houses reduced to foundations, trees stripped completely bare, looking like massive toothpicks stuck in the ground, cars wrapped around utility poles, barns torn apart, their contents scattered across fields. Entire neighborhoods looked like war zones. The National Guard had set up checkpoints and distribution centers. FEMA trailers were arriving. People wandered through the wreckage of their homes looking dazed and lost. Eleonora's property looked even worse in daylight than it had 5 days ago. The farmhouse was completely gone, reduced to a field of splinters and broken concrete. Her grandmother's china, Thomas's medals from Vietnam, Marcus's childhood drawings, the Afghan that had sat on the back of the couch for 40 years. All of it gone, scattered across 40 acres, or carried away by winds strong enough to derail a freight train. She was standing in what used to be her kitchen, trying to remember exactly where the refrigerator had been when she heard them. Motorcycles. Not one or two, but dozens. Hundreds. The sound started as a distant rumble like thunder on the horizon, then grew louder and louder until it felt like the earth itself was shaking. Eleonora walked toward Route 76 and stopped breathing. They stretched as far as she could see in both directions, a river of chrome and leather flowing down the highway, filling both lanes, their engines creating a sound that vibrated in her chest. There had to be 300 of them, maybe more. Pickup trucks followed, loaded with lumber and tools and building materials. A massive flatbed carried what looked like a prefabricated roof system. Another truck was loaded with windows still in their factory wrapping. At the front of the procession rode Ryan Blackwood, his face split in an enormous grin. He looked like a general leading an army, proud and fierce and unstoppable. He pulled up beside Eleonora and killed his engine. Behind him, bike after bike did the same until the roar faded to silence, broken only by the sound of Patricia gasping in shock behind her. "Told you I'd be back," Ryan said, dismounting. Eleonora couldn't speak. Her hand covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Happy tears this time. Disbelieving tears. Ryan walked over and put his arms around her shoulders. 312 brothers from 27 chapters, he said, gesturing at the massive crowd behind him. Plus volunteers from the local community who heard your story and wanted to help. We've got contractors, electricians, plumbers, roofers, all volunteers, all here for you. "I can't," Eleonora managed to say, her voice breaking. "I can't afford this. I can't pay you back." "You're not paying for anything. This is a gift, Ellie, from the Hells Angels to the woman who saved 79 of our brothers." Ryan squeezed her shoulder. "Besides, we've got donations pouring in from across the country. People want to help. Your story touched them. You're famous now, whether you like it or not." A massive truck pulled up, and men began unloading equipment with military precision. Generators, power tools, pallets of lumber stamped with donations from suppliers in Kansas City and St. Louis, roofing materials, insulation, wiring, plumbing supplies, everything needed to build a house from scratch and then some. Eleonora watched in stunned silence as the bikers organized themselves. Teams formed, tasks were assigned. Someone had brought blueprints, someone else had permits. They'd done this before she realized. This wasn't just a group of bikers with good intentions. This was a coordinated construction operation. Within an hour, the debris from her old house was being systematically cleared and sorted. Salvageable materials went into one pile, trash into another. The foundation was being inspected by a man who introduced himself as Tommy Redstone, a structural engineer who rode with the Kansas chapter. "Foundation's solid," Tommy reported to Ryan. "Your dad knew what he was doing when he laid this, Ellie. We can build on it no problem." Patricia appeared at Eleonora's side, her mouth hanging open. "Ellie, what is happening?" "I think," Eleonora said slowly, "I'm getting a new house." The work began immediately. The Hells Angels moved with the kind of efficiency that spoke to years of brotherhood of working together toward common goals. Some of them were professional contractors. Others were electricians, plumbers, carpenters. A few were architects who'd taken time off work to be here. They'd come from California and Maine, from Texas and Montana, from every corner of the country. And they weren't alone. News trucks started arriving around mid-morning. Local residents who'd been skeptical at first came to watch, then stayed to help. The owner of Hollister Lumber showed up with 3 more truckloads of materials donated free of charge. A solar panel company from Springfield arrived with a complete installation kit offered at cost, but not everyone was happy about it. On the second day, trouble arrived in the form of Pastor Kenneth Wright and about 30 concerned citizens from First Baptist Church of Hollister. They gathered at the end of Eleonora's driveway, holding signs that read, "Keep Hollister safe," and "No to motorcycle gangs." Pastor Wright was a thin man in his 50s, with a face like a dried apple and eyes full of righteous certainty. He stood with his arms crossed, flanked by his flock, watching the bikers work with obvious disapproval. Sheriff Tom Bradford showed up around noon. He was a big man, 6'4", and built like a linebacker, gone slightly to seed, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much small-town drama. He pulled Ryan aside. "We got a problem, Blackwood." "What kind of problem, Sheriff?" "The kind where half the town is scared shitless about having 300 Hells Angels camped out here. Pastor Wright's talking about petitions and public safety concerns." Bradford removed his hat, ran a hand through his thinning gray hair. "I know what you're doing here. I know it's good work. But you got people who don't see it that way. They see the patches. They see the reputation. And they're worried." Ryan's jaw tightened. "We're building a house for a woman who saved our lives. That's all we're doing." "I know that. You know that. But Wright over there is telling anyone who'll listen that you're dangerous criminals using this as cover for God knows what. Drugs, weapons. He's got half the town worked up. That's bullshit, and you know it. Maybe. But he's got people listening. I'm not here to shut you down, Blackwood. I'm here to keep the peace. So I'm asking you nicely, don't give them any reason to escalate this. No fights, no confrontations. Just build the house and move on." Ryan nodded slowly. "We can do that, Sheriff. We're not here for trouble." But it wasn't that simple. That afternoon, while Eleonora was inside the construction site talking to one of the electricians about outlet placement, Pastor Wright approached the work zone. He had a megaphone, which should have been Eleonora's first warning. "This is a Christian community," Wright's amplified voice echoed across the property. "We don't want your kind here. The Hells Angels are criminals and thugs, and we won't stand by while you corrupt our town with your presence." The work stopped. 312 bikers turned to look at the pastor. The air went very, very still. Even the power tools fell silent. Ryan walked over to where Wright stood, his movements calm and controlled, but there was something dangerous in the set of his shoulders. "You need to leave. Now. This is a public road. I have every right to stand here and speak my mind." "You have the right to be a jackass, sure, but you're disrupting a construction site and you're doing it on purpose." Ryan's voice was level, but there was steel underneath. "We're trying to help someone, that's all. If you've got a problem with that, take it up with the sheriff. But don't come here with your megaphone and your judgment when you don't know a damn thing about us." "I know enough," Wright said. "I know what the Hells Angels stand for. Violence, drugs, lawlessness. I know about the criminal enterprises, the trafficking, the corruption. You can dress this up as charity all you want, but you can't fool me. Kenneth Wright. Everyone turned. Eleonora had emerged from the construction site, and she was furious. Her small frame vibrated with anger as she marched up to the pastor.
"I've known you since you were 12 years old and got caught stealing candy from Mabel's general store," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't you dare come onto my property and insult these men."
Wright's face flushed.
"Ellie, I'm trying to protect you from these people. You don't understand what they're capable of. You're a victim of Stockholm Syndrome, identifying with your captors. It's tragic, really."
Stockholm Syndrome. Eleonora's voice rose. "These men saved my life, Kenneth, and now they're giving up their own time, their own money to give me a home. What have you done for me lately? Besides trying to convince me to sell my land to your developer friend so he can build condos and you can get a nice little kickback." The crowd of protesters shifted uncomfortably. Apparently, this was news to some of them. Wright's face went from red to purple. "That's a slanderous accusation, Eleonora Hartwell. I ought to sue you for defamation." "Go ahead and try. I've got the emails you sent Kenneth, the ones where you outlined exactly how much money I'd get if I sold and how much you'd get for brokering the deal." Eleonora crossed her arms. "These men are my guests. They're doing more Christian work in one day than you've done in your entire career of self-righteous posturing, and if you have a problem with that, you can leave."
Wright opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away. His protesters followed, though several of them looked back with expressions that might have been shame. One woman, elderly and using a walker, stopped to speak to Eleonora. "I'm sorry, Ellie. We didn't know. Kenneth said you were being held against your will. The only person holding me against my will is you, Martha, by making me stand here defending myself when I've got a house to build."
Martha smiled apologetically and shuffled after the others. Ryan looked down at Eleonora with something like awe. "You didn't have to do that."
"Yes, I did. Kenneth Wright is a hypocrite and a bully, and I'm sick of pretending he's not. He's been trying to push me off this land for 3 years, and the tornado gave him hope he'd finally succeed. Well, he's going to be disappointed." The confrontation galvanized something in the community. That evening, local news crews descended on the property for the first time, and Eleonora reluctantly agreed to give an interview. She stood in front of the partially constructed house, surrounded by bikers, who were still working even though the sun had gone down, and they'd switched to portable lights. The reporter was a young woman named Jennifer Chen. "No," Eleonora corrected herself, looking at the name on the microphone, "Jennifer Chambers." The reporter smiled nervously at the bikers surrounding them. "Mrs. Hartwell," Jennifer asked, "what made you decide to help the Hells Angels during the tornado?" Eleonora looked at the reporter like she was speaking a foreign language. "They were human beings in danger. What else was I supposed to do?" "But weren't you afraid? These are the Hells Angels. They have a reputation for violence and criminal activity." "I was afraid of the tornado, sweetheart, not of people." Eleonora's voice was firm. "And I'll tell you something else. These men you're so afraid of, they're better people than most of the so-called respectable folks in this town. They showed up. They kept their word. They're building me a house with their own hands. How many people can you say that about?" The clip went viral within hours. Eleonora's words, delivered with such simple conviction and visible frustration, spread across social media like wildfire. "I was afraid of the tornado, not of people," became a rallying cry. It was shared millions of times, turned into memes, printed on T-shirts, used in sermons and speeches and think pieces about prejudice and redemption. By the next morning, donations had tripled. A lumber company in Kansas City sent 2 more truckloads of materials free of charge. The solar panel company upgraded their offer to a complete donation. Local restaurants started bringing food to the construction site, feeding the workers who were giving their time. People started showing up to volunteer locals who'd been moved by Eleonora's defense of the bikers, and slowly, grudgingly, the protesters stopped coming. On the third day, something extraordinary happened. They found the letter. Silas McGraw, the old biker who'd remembered Marcus from the cellar, was helping clear debris from the destroyed barn when he found a metal lockbox buried under what had been the tack room. It was dented and dirty, covered in mud, but intact. The tornado had buried it rather than carrying it away. He brought it to Ryan, who brought it to Eleonora. She was taking a break sitting on a cooler and drinking water when they approached. "This was in the barn," Ryan said gently. "Looks like it survived. We thought you should be the one to open it." Eleonora took the box with trembling hands. She recognized it immediately. It had belonged to Thomas. He'd kept important papers in it, documents he didn't want to lose to fire or flood or any of the other disasters that could befall a farm. She'd thought it was gone, destroyed with everything else. The lock was broken, probably from impact with debris. The box opened easily. Inside were papers, many of them water-damaged and illegible. Birth certificates stuck together, marriage licenses with the ink run, her nursing license from 40 years ago barely readable, and underneath everything protected in a plastic sleeve that had kept it dry was a folded piece of paper. Eleonora pulled it out and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was immediately painfully familiar. Marcus's handwriting, messy and bold, and exactly the way she remembered from birthday cards and postcards from Afghanistan. Her hands started to shake. "Ellie," Ryan asked gently, "what is it?" She couldn't speak. She just handed him the letter, her vision blurring with tears. Ryan read it aloud, his rough voice growing softer with each word. The construction site fell silent. 312 people stopped working to listen. "Mom, if you're reading this, something happened to me overseas and I didn't make it home. I need you to know a few things. First, I love you more than anything in this world. You gave me everything. You taught me to be a good man even when I didn't want to listen. You showed me what strength really looks like, what kindness costs, what it means to stand up when everything's pushing you down. Second, don't be sad for too long. I lived a full life. I had brothers who would die for me, and I'd die for them. I got to serve my country. I got to make a difference. That's more than most people ever get. Third, and this is important, the club will take care of you. I made them promise. Brother Silas has this letter, and he knows what to do. No matter what, no matter when, if you ever need help, they'll be there. You're not just my mother. You're their mother too. They'll protect you the way they protected me. They'll love you the way I love you. Don't argue with them about it. You know how stubborn bikers can be. Just let them help. Let them be family. That's what Ghost wants. That's what I want. I love you forever, Mom. Your son, Marcus. Ghost. The construction site had gone completely silent. 312 bikers had stopped working, and many of them had tears streaming down their weathered faces. Silas was on his knees, his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Eleonora's knees gave out. Ryan caught her, lowering her gently to the ground, holding her while she sobbed, great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. "He made them promise," she whispered between gasps, 40 years ago, and I never knew." Ryan's voice was rough with emotion. "The letter got lost, Ellie. When our chapter president Hank died in a motorcycle accident in 2013, his whole archive got scattered. Files, records, everything. We tried to reorganize, but some things were lost. This letter was one of them. He pulled her closer. But one of our brothers in Kansas City is an archivist. When your story went viral, he started going through old boxes looking for anything related to Ghost. He found this 2 days ago and overnighted it to me. Silas looked up, tears streaming into his white beard. I failed him, Ellie. He gave me that letter before he deployed, and I gave it to President Hank for safekeeping. I thought it would be safer in the official archive than with me on the road. But then Hank died, and I couldn't find it. I looked for years. I failed Ghost. I failed you. No, Eleonora said, reaching for the old man's hand. You didn't fail anyone. You're here now, you all are. That's what matters.
We were always supposed to find you, Ryan said quietly. Everything that happened, the tornado, us being on that road, at that exact moment, finding this letter. It's like Ghost was making sure his promise got kept even from beyond the grave. That night, Ryan called a special gathering. All 312 bikers assembled in the field beside Eleonora's property. They brought torches, creating a circle of firelight against the darkness. The air was thick with emotion and the smell of burning wood and the weight of promises being kept.
Brothers, Ryan's voice carried across the crowd. 40 years ago, a young man named Marcus Hartwell joined our club, road name Ghost. He served with honor both in the club and in the army. He went to war for his country, and he died a hero in Afghanistan, taking out an enemy position that was pinning down his unit. He saved 17 lives that day. 17 soldiers came home because of Ghost's sacrifice.
Murmurs of respect rippled through the crowd. This was news to Eleonora. She'd been told Marcus died in combat, but never the details. The army said it was classified, but his brothers knew. They'd always known. Before he left for his last deployment, Ghost made us promise something, Ryan continued. He made us promise to take care of his mother, to treat her as our own, to make sure she never felt alone or afraid. But the letter containing that promise got lost, and for 12 years, Eleonora Hartwell struggled alone, never knowing that her son had tried to protect her even from beyond the grave.
Ryan paused, his voice growing rougher. We failed to keep that promise. Through no fault of our own, through circumstances beyond our control, we failed. But fate has a way of correcting our mistakes. 5 days ago, this woman saved 79 of our brothers from certain death. She didn't know about the promise. She didn't know Marcus had made us swear to protect her. She didn't expect anything in return. She just opened her door because that's who she is. That's who Ghost's mother would be. He walked to Eleonora, who stood surrounded by bikers, tears streaming down her face in the torchlight. Patricia stood beside her sister, holding her hand, crying too. Eleonora Hartwell, Ryan said formally. By unanimous vote of every chapter represented here tonight, we're giving you something that's never been given to an outsider before. Something that's reserved only for the mothers of our fallen brothers, and only on rare occasions. Ryan reached into his vest and pulled out a small leather patch. It showed the Hells Angels' death head, but with a golden border instead of the usual red and white. Beneath the death head, stitched in careful letters, was a single word, Mother. You're not just Ghost's mother anymore, Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. You're our mother, all of us. From this day forward, you are family, not honorary family, not symbolic family, real family, and family takes care of its own. We will protect you. We will support you. We will make sure you never face another storm alone. This is our promise. This is Ghost's promise finally kept. The crowd erupted in cheers. Bikers surged forward to embrace Eleonora, to shake her hand, to welcome her into a family she never knew she had. They lined up 312 men and a few women, each one taking a moment to hug her, or kneel before her, or simply touch her hand. Some of them were crying, some were smiling. All of them were genuine. Patricia watched in amazement. Sheriff Bradford, who'd been keeping watch at the edge of the gathering, wiped his eyes. Even some of the local volunteers who'd come to help with construction were crying. And somewhere above, Eleonora was absolutely certain Marcus was smiling. Her boy, her beautiful boy who tried to take care of his mother even after death. He'd succeeded. After 40 years and a tornado and a miracle of timing, he'd succeeded. But the next morning brought a new crisis. Weather reports were calling for another severe storm system. Not a tornado this time, but a powerful thunderstorm with high winds, hail, and heavy rain. The house wasn't finished yet. The roof was only partially complete. The windows weren't all installed. If the storm hit before they could secure the structure, weeks of work would be destroyed. "How long do we have?" Ryan asked the meteorologist on the phone, his face grim. "Storm's moving faster than we initially predicted. You've got maybe 8 hours, 6 to be safe." 8 hours to finish a roof that should take 2 days, to install windows that should take a day, to secure a structure that was still open to the elements. It was impossible, but the Hell's Angels didn't believe in impossible. "Everyone who can swing a hammer, get up there," Ryan ordered, his voice carrying across the construction site. "We're working until it's done or the storm hits. No breaks, no shifts, continuous work. If you need to rest, rest for 5 minutes and get back up there." The bikers responded like soldiers receiving orders. They doubled their efforts. Men who'd been working since dawn dug deep and found reserves they didn't know they had. The professional contractors among them organized teams with brutal efficiency. Roofers worked on one section while carpenters secured another. Electricians ran wiring in areas that were already closed up. Plumbers roughed in pipes wherever they could find space. More volunteers showed up from town when word spread about the race against time. High school kids, retirees, even Pastor Wright appeared around noon, shamefaced and carrying tools. "I was wrong," he said to Eleonora, who was coordinating supply distribution. "I judged them without knowing them. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment. I'm sorry, Ellie. I'm here to help if you'll have me." Eleonora looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Grab a hammer. We need people securing the west wall." Wright nodded and hurried off. Patricia appeared at Eleonora's elbow. "That took guts," she said. "Coming here after what he said." "Everyone deserves a second chance." That's what Marcus would have said. The work continued at a frantic pace. Local restaurants brought food and people ate standing up, shoving sandwiches in their mouths between hammer swings. The women of First Baptist showed up with coffee and lemonade, Martha leading them with her walker, offering tearful apologies. By mid-afternoon, the sky was beginning to darken, not the green of tornado weather, but the heavy gray of serious storms. The wind was picking up. They had maybe 3 hours left. "We're not going to make it," one of the contractors said to Ryan. "There's no way. We need at least 5 more hours." "Then we work faster," Ryan said flatly. "Failure is not an option. This woman opened her door to us. We're finishing this house." Somehow, impossibly, the pace increased. Men worked through exhaustion. They worked through cramping muscles and blistered hands. They worked through the first drops of rain that began to fall around 5 in the evening. The professional contractors were calling out instructions, coordinating efforts, making sure that speed didn't compromise structural integrity. Eleonora moved through the chaos, bringing water, offering encouragement, her presence somehow spurring everyone to dig deeper. This tiny 68-year-old woman who'd lost everything but refused to break. If she could stand there calm and hopeful, they could finish this house. The storm hit at 7:15, 45 minutes later than predicted. By then, the roof was finished. Not perfect, not beautiful, but complete and watertight. The windows were installed, the doors were hung, the structure was secure. As rain began to pour down in sheets, as wind howled and lightning split the sky, everyone took shelter inside the half-finished house. They crowded into the raw interior, sitting on subflooring, leaning against unpainted drywall and laughing with relief and exhaustion. Eleonora stood in what would be her new kitchen, looking around at the bikers and volunteers, and even Pastor Wright, all of them soaking wet and covered in sawdust and grinning like they just won the lottery. Outside, rain hammered against the new roof, but inside, they were dry. The house was holding. "Thank you," Eleonora said, her voice breaking. "All of you. I don't have words for what this means." "You don't need words, Mom," Ryan said. "You saved our lives. We're saving yours. That's how family works." And outside, the rain washed clean the scorched earth, where Eleonora's old life had ended and her new one was being born. The house was finished on a Sunday morning, exactly 12 days after the tornado. Eleonora stood in the driveway at dawn, watching the sun rise over her new home. It was beautiful, more beautiful than her old house had ever been. A craftsman-style home with a wide front porch supported by tapered columns, exactly like she'd always dreamed of, but never could afford. The roof was new, sealed tight against Missouri weather, covered with architectural shingles that would last 30 years. Solar panels gleamed on the south-facing slope, already generating power. The siding was cement board that would never rot or peel. The windows were energy-efficient double-pane glass. The barn had been completely rebuilt, stronger than the original, with steel reinforcement and a metal roof. Above the door, carved into a massive oak beam, were the words, "Hartwell Family, established 1952, rebuilt 2024. But the most remarkable features were still to come. The bikers had worked through the night on final details, and they'd kept some things secret from Eleonora. On the front of the house beside the door was a large wooden plaque, hand-carved by a brother named Samuel, who'd been a woodworker before joining the club. It showed the Hells Angels' death head, surrounded by angel wings. Beneath it, burned into the wood in careful letters, was an inscription: "Here lives a true hero, Eleonora Hartwell, mother of the Hells Angels. May all who enter find shelter from the storm." Eleonora's hand went to her mouth. "It's too much," she whispered. Tears were streaming down her face again, but these were different tears. Joy tears, relief tears, gratitude tears. "This is all too much." "It's not enough," Ryan replied, standing beside her. "It'll never be enough, Ellie, not for what you did." The dedication ceremony was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. By noon, the property was packed with people, not just the 312 bikers who'd done the work, but neighbors from Hollister and the surrounding communities, reporters from newspapers and television stations across the region, politicians who wanted to be associated with the feel-good story of the year. The mayor of Hollister, a portly man named David Morrison, who'd been conspicuously absent during the construction, gave a speech about community and resilience. The governor of Missouri sent a proclamation declaring it Eleonora Hartwell Day and praising her courage. Several state representatives showed up to shake hands and pose for photos, but Eleonora barely paid attention to any of that.
What she cared about was being revealed piece by piece as the bikers gave her a tour of her new home. The kitchen was twice the size of her old one, with modern appliances donated by a manufacturer in St. Louis. The cabinets were solid wood, hand-built by club members who were professional carpenters. The countertops were granite donated by a quarry in Arkansas. The master bedroom had a bathroom with a walk-in shower designed for aging in place with grab bars and a bench and controls at the perfect height. The bedroom itself had a ceiling fan and a reading nook by the window that looked out over the fields. There were 2 other bedrooms, both larger than any room in her old house. For when family visits, Ryan explained, or when brothers need a place to stay. But what made Eleonora cry was the small room at the back of the house, a study with built-in bookshelves and a desk positioned to catch the morning light. On the desk was a framed photograph that made her knees weak. It was Marcus, a picture she'd never seen before him in his army uniform smiling at the camera. Beside it was his Purple Heart in a display case, along with other medals she didn't recognize. Bronze Star, Silver Star, his dog tags. "We reached out to his old unit," Silas explained softly. "They sent us everything they had, wanted you to have it, said Ghost was the bravest man they ever served with." On the wall were more photographs. Marcus, as a child, pictures Eleonora had thought were lost in the tornado, but the bikers had found them in that waterproof lockbox, had them professionally restored and framed them. Marcus learning to ride a bike. Marcus on his first day of school. Marcus with his Hell's Angels brothers, young and full of life. "This is your Marcus room," Ryan said, "so you never forget, so he's always with you." Eleonora couldn't speak. She stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by memories she'd thought were lost forever, and sobbed while Ryan held her, and Silas stood guard at the door, and her new family gave her space to grieve and heal. Outside, the yard had been transformed too. Beside the house was a garden area where 79 rose bushes had been planted, one for each person who'd sheltered in the cellar. Each bush had a small plaque with a road name: Iron, Razor, Old Timer. 79 names. 79 lives saved. In the center of the garden was a memorial stone granite polished to a mirror shine. It bore Marcus's name, his dates, and the words Marcus Ghost Hartwell, son, soldier, brother, hero, forever remembered, forever loved, forever our guardian angel. Around the memorial were benches where people could sit and remember. Wind chimes hung from hooks, their gentle music a constant reminder that beauty survives storms. The dedication ceremony itself was simple but profound. Pastor Wright, fully reformed and genuinely contrite, offered a blessing over the house. Sheriff Bradford gave a short speech about community coming together. The mayor presented Eleonora with a key to the city, which seemed redundant, given that she already had keys to her new house, but she accepted it graciously. Then Ryan stood up to speak, and the crowd fell silent. 12 days ago, he said, a tornado destroyed this house, but it couldn't destroy the woman who lived here. It couldn't destroy her courage, her kindness, or her capacity to love. He looked at Eleonora, who sat in a place of honor on the new porch. 40 years ago, her son Marcus asked us to take care of his mother. For reasons beyond our control, we failed to keep that promise for a long time. But we're keeping it now, and we'll keep it for the rest of her life. He turned to address the crowd of bikers. Brothers, we're establishing a new tradition today. This house, this land, this is sacred ground. This is where Ghost's mother lives, where our mother lives, and we protect what's sacred.
Ryan walked to Eleonora and knelt before her. One by one, every other biker did the same. 312 people kneeling before a 68-year-old woman in a floral dress, pledging themselves to her protection. "We swear to protect you," Ryan said, his voice carrying across the silent yard. "We swear to support you. We swear that you'll never face another storm alone. This is our promise. This is Ghost's promise finally kept. You're our mother now, and we take care of our mother." The crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. News crews captured every moment. But Eleonora only had eyes for the men and women kneeling before her. These impossible people who'd come into her life during a storm and refused to leave. "Thank you," she said simply. Because sometimes the biggest words are the smallest ones. Sometimes thank you is all you can say when your heart is too full for anything else. After the formal ceremony ended, the real celebration began. Someone had brought a sound system and music filled the air. Grills were fired up. Coolers appeared full of drinks. Children ran across the lawn playing games that had nothing to do with tornadoes or destruction or loss. Eleonora moved through the crowd accepting hugs and congratulations, but her mind was on what Ryan had said about a new tradition. She found him near the grill flipping burgers with the concentration of a man who took his barbecue seriously. "What did you mean by sacred ground?" she asked. Ryan smiled. "You'll see. It's a surprise for later." The surprise came after dinner as the sun was beginning to set. Ryan called for everyone's attention and gestured toward the driveway where more motorcycles were arriving. Dozens of them riders Eleonora hadn't seen before. "These are brothers from other chapters," Ryan explained. "Guys who couldn't make it for the construction but wanted to be here for this." He raised his voice. "Brothers, I want to introduce you to our mother, Eleonora Hartwell, Ghost's mom, the woman who saved 79 of us from the tornado." The new arrivals lined up to meet her, each one introducing themselves, shaking her hand, many of them with tears in their eyes. They'd traveled from California and Florida, from Washington State and Maine. Some had driven for days just to be here for this moment. "We've decided something," Ryan said, addressing the entire crowd now. "This house, this property, it's more than just where Mom lives. It's our spiritual center, our heart, and we're going to treat it that way." He pulled out a piece of paper and read from it formally. "Effective immediately, the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club establishes the following tradition. Every Sunday, any brother who's in the area is welcome to come here for dinner. Mom doesn't have to cook. We'll bring the food. But her door is always open to family. This house is our sanctuary, our safe place, the place we come to remember what we're really about." The crowd roared its approval. Eleonora felt her heart swell. A permanent tradition, a standing invitation, a guarantee that she'd never be alone again. "There's more," Ryan continued. "We're establishing the Marcus Ghost Hartwell Memorial Scholarship Fund. It'll provide full college scholarships to children of veterans, specifically those who lost parents in combat. We've already raised $200,000 in donations and we're just getting started." More cheers. Eleonora had to sit down, overwhelmed by the scope of what they were doing in her son's name. "And finally," Ryan said, "we're building a community center in downtown Hollister. The Ghost House, we're calling it. It'll provide services to anyone in need, food bank, counseling, job training. It'll be a place where people can get help. No questions asked, no judgment rendered. Because that's what Ghost would have wanted. That's what his mother taught him." Eleonora couldn't see through her tears anymore. Patricia was beside her, crying too, holding her sister's hand. Even Patricia's husband Gerald, usually stoic and reserved, was wiping his eyes. The party lasted long into the night. As darkness fell, someone brought out torches and strung up lights, transforming the yard into a magical space. Children fell asleep on blankets, while adults talked and laughed. Stories were shared. Memories were honored. New friendships were forged. Wade Razor Turner found Eleonora sitting on the porch swing, watching the festivities with a smile on her face. His arm was out of the cast now, though still weak. "Hey, Mom," he said, using the name that had become universal among the bikers. "Made you something." He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a leather bracelet with small silver charms dangling from it. Each charm was engraved with a road name, 79 tiny pieces of silver, each one representing a life saved. "So you never forget," Wade said. "Not that you could. But still, I wanted you to have something you could wear, something that reminds you that 79 people are alive because of you." Eleonora hugged him, this young man who had been a stranger 2 weeks ago and was now like a son. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's perfect." As the evening wore on, more people came to sit with her. Silas told stories about Marcus's early days in the club. A woman named Rebecca, who rode with a chapter from Oregon, shared how Marcus had helped her brother through addiction. A young man named Tommy described how Ghost had mentored him through his first year in the Army. Each story was a gift. Each memory was a treasure Eleonora had never known she was missing. Her son had touched so many lives, and she was only now learning the full extent of his impact. Around midnight, as the crowd finally began to thin, Ryan sat down beside Eleonora on the porch swing. "How you feeling, Mom?" "Overwhelmed, grateful, happy, sad, everything all at once." Eleonora looked out at the remaining guests, the bikers who'd become family. "I keep thinking this is a dream, that I'll wake up and the house will still be gone and I'll be alone again." "It's not a dream. This is real. You're stuck with us now, Ellie." "I can think of worse fates." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the swing creaking gently. The stars were visible now, brilliant against the dark sky. No green tinge tonight, just normal weather, just peace. "Ryan," Eleonora said quietly, "why did you stop that day when I was waving you down? Why didn't you just keep riding? You didn't know me. You didn't know about Marcus. You could have taken your chances with the storm." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I saw you running toward us, this old woman in a dress, waving her arms like she was trying to flag down a rescue boat, and something about it just hit me. You weren't running away from us. You were running toward us, towards 79 Hell's Angels in the middle of a tornado. That takes either courage or crazy, and I figured anyone that brave or that crazy deserved respect." He smiled. "Plus, there was something about your eyes. Even from a distance, even through the rain, I could see determination. Like you'd made up your mind and hell itself couldn't change it. That's the kind of person you follow, Ellie. That's the kind of person you trust." "I'm glad you did. Me too. You changed all of us, you know. Not just the 79 who were in that cellar, but everyone. Every brother who heard your story, who came here to help, who met you, and saw what real courage looks like. You reminded us what we're supposed to be about. Not the rebel image or the outlaw reputation, but brotherhood, loyalty, taking care of each other. You reminded us what matters." Eleonora squeezed his hand. "Marcus chose well when he chose you as brothers. We were the lucky ones." The party finally ended around 2 in the morning. The last bikers said their goodbyes, promising to return next Sunday for the first official family dinner. Patricia and Gerald headed back to Springfield, with Patricia extracting a promise from Eleonora to call if she needed anything. Finally, it was just Eleonora and Ryan standing in the driveway, looking at the house illuminated by the porch light. "You going to be okay here alone tonight?" Ryan asked. "I've been alone for a long time, Ryan. I'll be fine." "You're not alone anymore. Remember that. You've got 312 kids now. We're loud and we're messy, and some of us have questionable tattoos, but we're yours." Eleonora laughed. "Best family I could ask for." Ryan hugged her one more time, then climbed on his bike. "Next Sunday, Mom. Expect a crowd." "I'll be ready." She watched him ride away, his tail light disappearing into the darkness. Then she turned and walked into her new house. This beautiful home, built by love and loyalty and the unbreakable bonds of family. She went to Marcus's room first, as she knew she would, sat in the chair by the window and looked at his photographs, touched the glass case holding his medals, read the citations that explained what each medal was for. Her son had been a hero in ways she'd never fully understood. "You kept your promise, baby," she whispered to the photograph. "They're taking care of me just like you said they would. You'd be proud of them. You'd be proud of what they've done." Then she went to her new bedroom and lay down in a real bed with a real mattress, not the pull-out couch at Patricia's house. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, and thought about how strange life was. 2 weeks ago, she'd lost everything. Now she had more than she'd ever dreamed possible. She fell asleep, smiling Marcus's letter on the nightstand beside her bed, knowing that tomorrow would bring the first day of her new life. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Sunday dinners became legendary. That first Sunday, about 40 bikers showed up with enough food to feed 100 people. They grilled and ate and told stories and watched football on the new television that had been installed in Eleonora's living room. It felt like Thanksgiving, except it was just a regular Sunday in April. The second Sunday, 70 people came. Word was spreading through the network. Hell's Angels from across the Midwest were planning their routes to include a stop in Hollister, Missouri, just to have dinner with Mom. By the fourth Sunday, Eleonora had to start keeping a guest book because she couldn't remember everyone's names. Over 100 people showed up that week, some of them bringing wives and children. The yard was full of motorcycles and laughter and children playing. But it wasn't just bikers. The story had touched people across the country, and visitors of all kinds started showing up. A woman from Ohio who'd lost her son in Iraq wanted to meet another Gold Star mother. A family from Kansas whose home had been destroyed by a tornado came to see the house that love had built. A young man from Texas who'd been helped by Hell's Angels after a car accident wanted to thank the club in person. Eleonora welcomed them all. Her home became a place of healing, a space where people came to remember that goodness still existed in the world. She kept coffee brewing constantly. She always had cookies on hand. She listened to stories and shared her own and helped people process their grief and find their hope. Wade became a regular fixture at the house. He'd moved to Hollister from Kansas City, taking a job at a local auto shop so he could be closer to his new family. He came by almost every day, checking on Eleonora, helping with chores, gradually becoming like a son to her. He brought his girlfriend Amanda to meet Eleonora, and the young woman was instantly adopted into the family. Silas stopped by at least once a week, always bringing something. Fresh vegetables from his garden, a book he thought Eleonora would enjoy. Once, a handmade quilt that his wife had sewn featuring patches from old Hell's Angels t-shirts. "So you have something warm that smells like family," he explained. The community center. The ghost house opened 3 months after the tornado. It was a beautiful building in downtown Hollister with Marcus's photograph in the lobby and the Hells Angels Death Head logo beside an American flag. The center provided free meals, job training, counseling services, and a place for veterans to gather. The scholarship fund grew to $500,000. The first scholarships were awarded that summer to 5 children of fallen soldiers. Eleonora attended the ceremony and hugged each recipient, telling them about Marcus and making sure they understood they were honoring not just his memory, but the memory of all those who'd served and sacrificed. 3 months after the tornado, a national magazine sent a reporter to do a feature story. The journalist was a young woman named Sarah Mitchell, nervous about interviewing a house full of bikers but determined to get the story. "How did you know they wouldn't hurt you?" Sarah asked her recorder sitting in Eleanor's living room while bikers milled around outside preparing for Sunday dinner. "When you saw all those Hells Angels coming toward your house, weren't you afraid they might take advantage of the situation?" Eleonora looked at the reporter with barely concealed frustration. Take advantage. They were terrified. They were about to die. What did you think they were going to do, stop to rob an old lady while a tornado was bearing down on them? But the Hells Angels have a reputation for violence, for criminal activity. "The Hells Angels have a reputation created by people who don't know them," Eleonora said firmly. "You want to know what I've learned in 69 years of living? The scariest-looking people often have the kindest hearts. And the ones in suits and ties, the ones who look respectable and proper, they can be the real monsters." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a biker by his leather. And never ever underestimate what a little kindness can do. I opened my door to 79 strangers, and they gave me back my life. They gave me a family. They gave me purpose. That's not what criminals do, sweetheart. That's what family does." Sarah's next question was softer. "Do you have any regrets about that night? Anything you wish you'd done differently?" Eleonora thought about it. About Marcus. About Thomas and Daniel, and all the losses that had led her to that moment. About the tornado and the cellar, and the choice she'd made to help instead of hide. Then she thought about the porch she was sitting on, the family surrounding her, the love she'd found at 68 years old when she'd stopped expecting it, the scholarship fund that would help hundreds of children, the community center that was already changing lives. "Just one?" she said, a smile playing at her lips. "I wish I'd made more coffee that first night in the cellar. 79 people and only 4 thermoses. Some of the boys had to go without, and that's always bothered me." The article came out 2 weeks later with the headline, "The Woman Who Opened Her Door to Strangers and Found a Family." It was featured on the magazine's cover with a photograph of Eleonora surrounded by bikers on her front porch, all of them smiling. The article was beautiful, capturing not just the story, but the spirit of what had happened. It ended with Eleonora's quote about the coffee. Readers loved it. The comment section filled with people sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness of strangers who'd become family of prejudices overcome. The magazine sold out its print run and had to do a second printing. But for Eleonora, the real reward came every Sunday when her yard filled with motorcycles and laughter. When Wade brought Amanda by to announce their engagement and ask if they could have the wedding at the house. When a young biker from Colorado showed up with his newborn daughter and asked Eleonora to be the baby's honorary grandmother. When Silas taught Patricia's daughter how to change a tire and the two of them formed an unlikely friendship. Life had given her a second act, and she was determined to make the most of it. 6 months after the tornado, Eleonora celebrated her 69th birthday with 200 people in attendance.
There was a cake big enough to feed everyone, decorated with tiny motorcycles made of fondant. The bikers serenaded her with a roaring rendition of Happy Birthday that could probably be heard in the next county. Wade and Amanda gave her a leather jacket with Ghost's Mom embroidered on the back. Silas gave her a handmade rocking chair to match the one on the porch. Ryan presented her with a photo album filled with pictures from the construction of the house, a visual record of the miracle that had transformed her life. But the best gift came from Patricia, who pulled her sister aside after the cake was cut. "I need to tell you something," Patricia said, her eyes wet with tears. "I was wrong about everything. About the farm, about moving on, about what family means. I thought I was being practical, trying to protect you from more hurt. But you taught me something, Ellie. You taught me that the things worth having are worth fighting for. That family isn't just blood. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing anyway." She hugged her sister fiercely. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be your sister. And I'm grateful to these men who saw what I couldn't see, that you're someone worth fighting for." Eleonora held her sister and cried happy tears. Because reconciliation is its own kind of miracle. Because forgiveness can heal even the deepest rifts. Because family, real family, finds its way back together. A year after the tornado, the anniversary was marked with a special ceremony. Eleonora stood in the garden of 79 roses, all of them blooming now, filling the air with fragrance. Each rose was healthy and strong, just like the people they represented. The bikers gathered around the memorial stone, along with many of the volunteers who'd helped build the house. Pastor Wright was there now, a regular Sunday dinner attendee and a genuine friend. Sheriff Bradford came with his wife. The mayor showed up with a proclamation declaring it Hell's Angels Appreciation Day in Hollister. Ryan stood before the crowd and spoke about the tornado, about the night in the cellar, about the choice one woman had made that saved 79 lives. He talked about Marcus and his 40-year-old promise finally kept. He talked about family and loyalty and the bonds that hold us together through the darkest storms. Then each of the original 79 who'd sheltered in the cellar came forward and placed a stone at the base of Marcus's memorial. 79 stones, each one engraved with a word: courage, kindness, family, love, honor, sacrifice. 79 words to describe what Eleonora and Marcus meant to them. When they were finished, the memorial was surrounded by a ring of stones, a permanent reminder of the night that changed everything. Eleonora placed the last stone herself. It simply said home, because that's what she'd found. Not just a house, though the house was beautiful. Not just a family, though the family was everything. But home in its truest sense. A place where you're safe. A place where you're loved. A place where you belong. That night, as the celebration wound down and the last guest departed, Eleonora sat on her porch in the rocking chair Silas had made. She was 70 years old now, and she'd never been happier or more at peace. She thought about the tornado and the choice she'd made. If she could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would she make the same choice? Would she still open those cellar doors? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Because the fear had lasted a few hours, but the love had lasted forever. Because she'd lost a house, but gained a family. Because Marcus's promise had been kept, and in being kept, had transformed not just her life, but the lives of hundreds of people touched by the ripple effects of kindness. Ryan's motorcycle rumbled up the driveway. He killed the engine and walked over to the porch, settling into the chair beside her without saying anything.
They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. "Beautiful night," Ryan finally said. "They all are now." "Mom, I've been meaning to ask you something." "What's that?" "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the tornado had missed you? If we'd never been on that road that day, if you'd never had to make that choice?" Eleonora considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I think about Marcus's letter about how he said things happen the way they're supposed to. Maybe the tornado wasn't random. Maybe it was Ghost's way of making sure his promise got kept, bringing his brothers to his mother when she needed them most." "You really believe that?" "I believe that love is stronger than death. I believe that promises matter. I believe that sometimes the universe conspires to make things right even if it has to use a tornado to do it." She smiled. "And I believe that opening your door when someone needs help is never the wrong choice, even when you're scared." Ryan nodded slowly. "Ghost would be proud of you. He'd be proud of you too. All of you. You kept his promise. You gave me back my life." They sat together until the stars filled the sky, until the lightning bugs began their nightly dance, until the sounds of the night settled into a peaceful rhythm. Then Ryan stood to leave. "Sunday dinner next week, Mom. Wade says he's bringing his famous chili. I'll make cornbread. You don't have to cook. That's the whole point." "I know, but I want to. It's my house, and I'll cook in it if I want to." Ryan laughed and hugged her goodnight. Then he rode away, his tail light disappearing into the darkness like it did every night he visited. Eleonora went inside her beautiful house, past Marcus's memorial room, past the kitchen that worked perfectly, past all the things that love had built. She prepared for bed in a bathroom with grab bars and a walk-in shower. She lay down in a comfortable bed under a roof that didn't leak. And before she turned out the light, she read Marcus's letter one more time, the way she did every night. "You were right, baby," she whispered to his photograph. "They took care of me, just like you said they would, just like you knew they would." She turned out the light and lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of her house settling, thinking about storms and choices and the strange paths life takes. She thought about all the losses she'd endured and all the gifts she'd received. She thought about family, both the one you're born into and the one you choose. And somewhere in the darkness, somewhere in the spaces between stars, she felt Marcus smile. Her son, her guardian angel, her ghost, still watching, still protecting, still making sure his mother was never alone. Because love doesn't die. It just changes form. It becomes promises kept, and families formed and doors opened during storms. It becomes 79 roses blooming in a garden. It becomes Sunday dinners and leather jackets and the sound of motorcycles bringing family home. It becomes a house built by brotherhood and a life rebuilt by love. It becomes enough. And as Eleonora drifted off to sleep in her perfect house surrounded by her impossible family, she understood something fundamental about the universe. That kindness is never wasted. That courage is always rewarded. That opening your door when someone needs help is the most important thing you can do. That sometimes you lose everything to gain what really matters. That sometimes the storm destroys your house so your family can build you a home. That sometimes 79 strangers become 300 sons, and that's not a bad trade if you ask her. That's not a bad trade at all. The end of one chapter, the beginning of another, and always, always the promise kept.